I'm wiping out a brown glaze on a grey canvas, which is the kind of thing Rembrandt would have used for a quick sketch. All painters stimulate their imagination by various means, and this is one of them. But this is an easy way in which to produce form and colour and scumble and glaze all in the one operation. Rembrandt van Rijn was born in Leiden in 1606 and died in Amsterdam in 1669. He was the son of a miller. His parents sent him to the Leiden University to study the ancient languages, but he showed a preoccupation for the arts, mainly drawing, and asked to be allowed to leave the university. His parents very sensibly for us allowed him to go into the studio of a man named Peter Lastman. Lastman was a religious painter, and he taught a beautiful technique of painting to Rembrandt, who used it throughout his life with his own personal variations. He was happily engaged in this when he met Jan Levens, a young man about his own age, about 20 or so, and the two boys decided to start a little studio. After Rembrandt had been with Levens for some time, he became very well known for his portrait painting, which was much needed then because of the nouveau riche with the wealth of Holland and so on. And he worked on his own and married a lady called Saskia Uhlenberg, who was a wealthy lady from a wealthy family. Her dowry enabled him to set up studio and buy a house in Amsterdam, which is still there. And they lived very, very happily. When Saskia died, he was bereft, and it didn't seem to interfere with his own personal painting much. He never really stopped his work. This was his main love in life, and he just painted come what may and so on. And then into his life came another lady, and that's a rather sad business. She was a bit round the bend and ended up in a court case and all that. We'll skip that bit, because after this finished, he then lived what is euphemistically termed in sin with a rather unattractive and yet very charming peasant girl whose name was Heidreka Stoffels, and she became not only his mistress but his helpmate. And so the old boy carried on into a wonderful old age filled with potentiality until he received a commission. And he had this commission from the Guild of Amsterdam, and it was called Captain Koch and his watch. It's a day painting. We call it the night watch now. Actually, it's a 12 o'clock noonday painting. Each paid their own amount of 500 livres or something per head, and expect to have their faces shown equally to the bloke next to them. Instead of this, he created what is, in my opinion, one of the greatest masterpieces the world has known in painting. But it wasn't wanted because they hadn't the intelligence and perception to realise they were faced with a genius. And so, because of this, and this is the tragedy of life, he soon became hard up, and indeed his debts increased because he was a very generous man and gave much. And his work in this time changed from the classicist to the Baroque, and his colour and technique, of course, became extremely personal. And he is, without doubt, practically, he's the most humanistic, certainly the greatest painter, in my opinion, in the world, although most people would place Titian there. There were two portraits of Rembrandt and Titus, his son, and they had a lovely relationship. For this purpose of showing his technique, I'm combining a portrait of Titus and Rembrandt together on one canvas in one of his many techniques. This is a medium canvas that has been sized, whited with a gesso and a coat of red bole. Rembrandt used this extensively for his work, as the warmth was produced from inner and not outer, and then he would make this cold and then warm again. We always associate Rembrandt with the friendly colours of white, yellow, red, brown, etc. In point of fact, his habit was to work from the warm to the medium to the cold to the warm right up. I've made a little indication here in chalk. Now I've finished this off. I've decided to paint Rembrandt at the age of about 51 and his son Titus at the age of about 16 in order to unite the father and son in a friendly kind of painting. He would indicate with a few marks the composition, probably make a few sketches beforehand, and in the relationship between father and son, he would probably do himself, as Titus obviously saw him 10,000 times, drawing. So I'll make him drawing. He's using a quill pen, little stand. I pinched this stand from a Rembrandt. It's not very original, but... And his son, who had this wonderful relationship between the father and son. Titus actually did a little painting and drawing himself, inevitably, being in his father's house and studio for so many years. I've always felt that, although because Rembrandt lost his daughters and so on, and other children, Rombustus, that, and he loved his wife very dearly. She, unfortunately, poor lady, she died quite possibly from childbirth or something. It's very common in those days. So we have, broadly speaking, a linear composition I've made very quickly. Then with his usual penchant for light and shade, he would use tempera on this. I won't trouble to fix this and make a very quick sketch. I've got tempera colours here. He would have used a similar half tempera, half oil paint in order to achieve a quick drying effect. Now, at this time in the history of art, chiaroscuro, means light and shade, Italian word, stemmed across, it streamed like a great light across the whole of Europe from Italy, from the hands of Michelangelo Caravaggio, who was a forerunner of the Dutch school of this period. Ter Broeken, many Dutch painters, Honthurst of the Night. I could name many of the painters who were influenced by this incredible preoccupation with the action of light upon the human form. Now the little boy, I put a candle in here, it's a bit corny, but still they did it. A little candle to illuminate, and he would strike light up, making this like a sun bursting through. Well, now he would make a kind of quite a bold statement like this. I must go back to see what's happened. It's dreadful, but anyway. And then balance the force of light, hand the folds of a dress. He would use a mirror for this, or perhaps his old friend, the man in the golden helmet, would creep in and act as model. He was a model, in fact, famous model. In many paintings by he would probably wear Rembrandt's clothes, and the governor would make a few sketches. And about that stage, he would take up a drawing brush and qualify it. I won't spend much time on this because I've prepared a little more finished sketch, but then he would outline the eyes, nose, etc., and so forth like this, knowing in his mind, from his vast knowledge, where to put the accents and so forth. It is a very, very, very beautiful technique on a very, very badly painted picture, but nevertheless, the texture of this tempera, very fast drying, adds up in the tiny touches here and there, the thicknesses, the impasto, into a wonderful, rugged groundwork for future painting on top of it. What I'm trying to establish, excuse me, is the misnomer about Rembrandt's work. He did not ever paint hot initially. All his wonderful colours came from the fact that he painted virtually in black and white. This is completely grey. It's grey and premature. After this would be established, because he'd worked much more slowly than this, but building up his form in thicknesses and thins, the way of the old masters, but in an incredibly cool range of tone. It's just to give an idea of the chiaroscuro technique of Rembrandt, and a very good move in paintings of this kind is to technically, it's a technical thing, it makes the painting last longer, is to very gently kiss every area, every part of the picture, so that the light and the paint are spread through. And it will also serve to take a rounder form like this, to push the figure away from the wall. You get this in Vermeer, who's one of the greatest wall painters in the world. And of course Rembrandt would be aware of all the tricks of the trade, incredible craftsman. His work was, in point of fact, manifold. He painted equestrian portraits and landscapes and seascapes, and he worked on every medium. What I'm doing now is putting the substructure for subsequent work. Once the form is more or less established, like this, the whole of the painting is varnished and given a coat of any colour relating to the mood of the picture. This is a green glaze which gives unity and coolness to the painting. It's a different way of making grisaille. Instead of mixing 3 tones, this is a quicker way of calming the picture down. When I've applied this, I will stipple the picture to soften the painting. This painting has had time to dry, about 12 hours or so that, but I've given this a little coat of varnish so that the paint will adhere to it, not in excess, and I've laid a very quick tempera palette to pick out a few salient features to help establish colour. We go on to colour now. This will be very bright and will be glazed after with oils. Normally Rembrandt would glaze these in transparent washes, but we haven't the drying time, so I'm doing it. It's rather more difficult, but still we're soon, just to establish a few colours. The process of warming the lights, lips, etc., the fleshy parts, still applies. The cheeks, I'm putting a gentle whisper of this very fast drying paint. It's the fastest drying paint there is over this. And the same applies to the wonderful hand of Rembrandt. I'm not saying the painting's wonderful, but certainly his hands were wonderful in what they made for us all to enjoy. I won't bother to lower the easel, it's back-breaking. I'll end up like Quasimodo, but it doesn't matter. We go on like this, introducing a little red here and there. I'm going to change the tone. Now we start. The candle, we'll make it, the yellow is coming from there. So I'll kiss on the already established drawing that was made before. We play the light on this. I told you, I think, that Caravaggio shed a light across Europe with his rediscovery of the magic of light. And of course, everyone, of course, went mad about it. And a whole series of painters, especially in Holland, where we have long winter nights. There's a candle was obviously, and lamp was the obvious illumination then. And of course, everyone knows that candlelight is the most flattering of all lights. This is why they have them in restaurants when the food's a bit, off. It became a kind of fashion to such an extent, I think, yes, I'm sure, Gerard Honthorst was actually named Gerard of the Night, because realizing the incredible effects one could obtain from physically having models with light, that he became obsessed practically and painted little else but night scenes. Of course, we know that Gainsborough had 500 candles in a chandelier to paint the ladies because it cast a beautiful light upon their faces, which were often pockmarked from disease, incidentally. I'm now going to glaze the background and the odd bits in here with a warm glaze to give it a bit of unity and richness. I'm using a relatively thick glazing medium. This is to give the whole thing a kind of Vigenay edging, because the 18th century painters used the oval a lot. Here and there in Dutch painting you'll find ovals also. The reason for this is, paradoxically, we look out of ovals and not squares. Our eyes are oval-shaped, should be anyway. I'm doing this rather crude stippling in order to create the form of faces, blending the paint. Now we're seeing how the grey underpainting grins through. And the red I put on previously is showing through strongly still. Now, Titian, who was the forerunner, of course, of Rembrandt, Titian said, even 40 glazes are not enough. In order to achieve certain effects, it is necessary to give glaze after glaze after glaze. Rembrandt was one of the first artists to create what is called directional brushstrokes. He would drag, it's called scuffing, he would drag this colour over the glazes, creating the textures for which he's so famous, by putting a little thick on in pastel and brushing it out into the form of the whatever, allowing the paint itself to tell a story. Now the liveliness, if he worked very quickly, obviously the brush strokes would show. If he made a movement like this and left it, it will create a kind of impasto for all time. Now, I drew very relatively carefully a necklace around the neck of Titus, and I'll just catch the lights of that with the brush, and you will see how it catches the surface. And I can't see it from where I am, but I know from experience that back there it will register as an impasto for which Rembrandt loved. Now, he painted jewellery and so on, and armour in order to express not just physical wealth, but for the love of the texture of these materials. He had a great collection of armour and precious clothes that he copied from the textual point of view. I'd like to point something out as I work, that the old masters of this period had erroneous reputation, as it were, for having a golden glow to their work, you know, the golden glow of the old masters. The golden glow, in fact, is the action of the resin that they applied to their work, plus discoloured varnish over the years. It goes, especially cobalt, especially amber varnishes. They go a beautiful golden yellow, and then to a golden brown, and then to a golden black, actually. So in the end, you can't see the painting for the varnish, as it were. But the point is that most of these paintings early on had, even the nocturnal paintings, had quite a bright colour range, especially Rubens and indeed Rembrandt, but they had quite a bright colour range. All this would have disappeared over the years with the discoloured varnish. It's a misnomer. I'm just warming little areas again. We've re-establishing the lights that come and go, redrawing. All this should have a succession of varnishes, as many as 12, 15, varies on the job. And then a very gentle semi-scumble in this dark area to give it a bit of life. It's a bit heavy at the moment. It's not easy to do these techniques when at the inappropriate time. One of the great secrets of academic painting is the various drying times of each material you use. That's more or less the tonal quality you get on about the second or third state. This would have to be thoroughly dried in several weeks, and have one thick coat of intermediate varnish, and then be glazed, scumbled until the ultimate. I mean, you could go on for 7 or 8 stages from here on. This is broadly speaking about all I can do at this moment, actually. Thank you.